Something the community wanted for so long, Draft, turned out to be a bit of a mixed bag at best inside Pokemon Unite. Got that in early, and I think a lot of people would notice that it was a bit of a disaster and a bit of a failure, much like my business Uber Pool, where I would bring a pool to your house on a big truck and everyone from your neighborhood could get in. It was gross and just difficult. In this video, I want to talk about what happened or is happening with Draft, how it could be fixed, and why we didn't really get the Draft that we deserved. Imagine this. You go to a hamburger restaurant called Hamburger Restaurant. I could have been more creative there. And inside this hamburger let me just take that again. Imagine this. You go to a hamburger restaurant called Hamburger Restaurant. Jeez, those years of improv really didn't pay off. And inside Hamburger Restaurant, you find out that they cook your hamburger not really the way you want it. It's like really undercooked and they don't throw any condiments on it and the bun's kind of sliding off and it's a mess. And they go, "How do you like that hamburger?" And you go, "I didn't really love it." And they go, "Well, that's it. No more hamburgers, I guess." And there you go. Now it turns into an Uber Pool location. I feel like that's sort of what happened with Draft. Draft is great, and we absolutely want and need Draft for the game to be more competitive and for us to help balance out the moments that are unbalanced. Imagine if during the Mewtwo Y or Zacian meta, we were able to ban these Pokemon out, effectively telling the developer they are way too good and they need nerfs. We just saw this happen with Tyranitar. Tyranitar got huge buffs, but it was banned out in almost every single Draft game, forcing the devs to nerf the Pokemon back to a more reasonable state. Even though it's still quite good, now if it pops up in Draft, I don't think it's going to have the same priority for bans at all. It helps us mitigate bad balance decisions, and it steers the devs in directions that help them change some of the bad balance decisions they've made. That part of Draft is amazing, but there were so many issues, so many uncooked hamburgers, so many pools sliding off the back of a flatbed truck, and it just didn't work. And I get why people were not blown away by it. To say that it failed is maybe a bit of an overstatement, because I do think a lot of people liked it enough, but there's no way that the reaction to it was overwhelmingly positive, which it should have been if it was done well. I have tons of people watching live talking about Draft or replying to tweets or something that I post about Draft, and it really is a mixed bag. Some players really like it, other players have a lot of very valid complaints, and these are all things that could be fixed. So let's go through them right now. First, let's talk about the time it takes. The draft process in this game takes way too long, considering the game is 10 minutes in length. They need to do something about this. I understand how valuable Draft is, but you have to make it snappier. And there are a few great ways that this can be done. You could cut down the ban phase pretty considerably and get rid of some of the early issues that you have with players not being able to select a ban in time. I'll talk about that in a moment. Just by giving players sort of a broad, here are a couple of Pokemon I would like banned. You could set this in sort of a main menu, and then when you load into a match, all of your teams have your bans lined up, and all of a sudden you get 4 Pokemon banned that are sort of majority vote. You could do something like that, and that would be done very quick. So you could just set on your account, for instance, that you want Mewtwo Y, Miraidon, and Slowbro banned. Those could be your top 3. The game looks at everyone's top 3 on both sides. It spits out 4 bans, and you move on. That would at least put you in a position where you could set up bans that are based on the meta and then move forward in the match very quickly. We should talk right now about one of the biggest issues with it, and that is the stability and the bugs in this mode. It's not done well. I mean, the fact is, it is not set up well. Draft mode crashes my game more than anything else. And if you're a mobile player, you might be saying, your game crashes? Oh yeah, we're playing on Switch, baby. This thing is a potato with an HDMI cable hooked up to it, which is another business idea I had that just didn't work out. I think it's because it doesn't do anything. Especially on Switch, when you first load into draft and you're one of the first bans, it is chugging so much that you actually don't have time to select the Pokemon you want to select. I'm not surprised or upset at all at the person who gets a first ban and doesn't pick anything. Oftentimes their game is not even letting them choose what they would like. Then we have another issue that comes up outside of this, which is the bans players choose. We'll talk about that in a moment. But we have stability issues when you load in, stability issues after your team is selected and you want to move items around. It will often crash. It's just a mess from top to bottom. And now, of course, if it crashes for a player and they either don't want to or aren't able to get back into their game, which can happen in multiple different ways, now you've gone through this entire draft process just to have the match reset for an AFK. It's a mess, and it's a mess because it's not stable. Now we also have the discussion of how useful this mode is. There are enough players who have no interest in figuring out the meta or no interest in banning out something that they don't want to deal with. All they really care about is playing Charizard. Yesterday on stream, I got into a draft game where our last pick or second to last pick, which would be one of the first two bans on our team, did not ban, and they picked Charizard, regardless of what was going on with our team composition. And they happen to be a player who's had 10,000 games on Charizard with a 45% win rate or something like that. The fact of the matter is, this player shouldn't be in draft at all, and that's a matchmaking issue, and that's a sort of a draft pairing issue as well. But also it sets up an issue with draft where we are giving the power of one of the most important things in draft, the bans, to a player who simply doesn't care as long as he gets to play Charizard. By the way, good luck. I know you got some Charizard buffs coming up. I'm sure it's going to be exciting for you. So that speaks to how draft can be completely useless. You can see the enemy team, or your team at times, craft a beautiful team with a supporter and a defender and a great all-rounder and a couple attackers that are going to fill out the roster really well. Or you could have players who don't care at all about draft and just insta-lock Decidueye because that's all they were going to play no matter what. It's a problem. It's a matchmaking problem, but it is a draft problem as well, because if those players are hopping into these draft games and there isn't anything dissuading them from playing these, there isn't any system in place that says, hey, you're sub 50% with 9,000 games, you probably aren't ready for this high level of Pokemon Unite, then I think you're going to deliver an experience that is subpar to the people who actually want to engage in draft in a reasonable way. You also create an unfortunate situation for the higher ranked players on your team where you're often picking first. In most every draft game, unless I'm with a duo or trio, I'm either the first or maybe second pick. To be fair, I play the game a lot, so it's expected that I would be up there often. But it is unfortunate for me because whatever I pick is immediately counterpicked by the other side, or I also run into a situation where I can't as easily pick something to support the team because I don't know exactly what direction we're going in. And as a higher ranked player, you are expected to carry a match. This isn't the community's expectation. This is Pokemon Unite's matchmaking's expectation, which is unfortunate because it forces you or funnels you into often picking one of the stronger carries in the game, then your opponent's looking to counter that, and then finally when it gets down to the last two picks on the team, they just pick whatever they want because they are the lowest ranked players and they're not taking the game as serious. It's a mess. There's also no draft tutorial. It's not something that they teach players how to use, except there is a draft tutorial. Did you know that? Because I kind of heard whispers of this, and I had to reach out to Ender to find out exactly where to find this. Let me show you the draft tutorial that I'm sure we have all used. So you remember when draft came out and we all went over to the custom battle section and then we went down to draft, and then from there we said, hey, I want to learn more about draft. Maybe I'll start a game. And then we went, oh no, wait, actually what I'll do is press A on this right here and then press the plus button for map help to learn about draft. I'm sorry. What percentage of players could have possibly done this? It has to be less than 1%. It's interesting that they have a draft tutorial. This feels like something that you absolutely without question, need to get players in the game to do before playing a draft match. But instead, the way you find it is going into custom battle, scrolling down to draft pick, and then pressing map help. I have played this game for thousands of hours, and I had no idea that existed. Truly, if you knew this existed without anyone telling you, I really need to hear from you in the comments, because I think you're a liar. No, but I just want to know if anyone found this without hearing about it from someone else. Please let me know. All right, so I've been complaining about draft for a little while, but I want to talk about how we can fix it and why we should. First, let me start with why we should. Draft is important. It makes the game competitive. It will convince players to pick better compositions even if they don't notice it at first. We're probably never going to get little Mr. Charizard off of Charizard, but a lot of players will start to play a more balanced team composition inside draft. And I personally have seen many games where players band together and find a good team composition because of it. It also, as I mentioned earlier, will help us deal with bad balance inside the game, which really hasn't happened except once or twice. Oh, and then that other time, and 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 that other time. So here's what needs to be done to fix it. First off, they have to make a stable draft client. They absolutely can. The Switch can run many games in a more stable way. It is up to the developers to make this client stable on Switch and mobile. Second, they need to set up a way for this to go faster, a lot faster. It's like 3.5 minutes for a 10-minute match. That needs to be cut down to about 1.5 minutes or so. If you spend 10%, maybe 15% of the time it would take to get into a match, fine. 30% of a match's time spent on draft is not right. It's way too much. You can have people pick their bands before the match, so it happens a lot faster. You could also have the selection of Pokemon happen a little bit quicker. You can have the screen at the end when you are doing your preparations move much faster, but regardless, you need to get people into games quicker. Maybe once you select your Pokemon, the screen automatically pops up in the middle where you are then able to select your items so you can do it while other allies are still selecting their Pokemon. Just something to speed this process up. It takes way too long. Of course, it needs a tutorial and it needs to shove it in players' faces. Not only does it need to tell them how to use it, but it needs to give them tips on what to do. You are in this position. Your team does not have a defender. Pick a defender, and you should give incentives for players to do that. That's right. You earn more coins when you pick a defender when a team needs a defender. Something like that. Something basic to encourage players to pick roles that the team needs. The final change is a tough one, but you would have to change the matchmaking system in such a way where players who don't want to engage with draft cannot engage with draft. Perhaps you could have a queue where you queue up and you can literally select queue up with draft as a possibility, queue up with draft as not a possibility. So all of those players who literally just want a one-trick Zeraora can get rid of draft. It's never an option for them. And if they queue into a game, you will not get a draft game in that sense. If there's no way to separate the players otherwise, which of course there is, but it's a much bigger can of worms, and I'm already opening 5 cans of worms over here. What do you want me to do? Have a bunch of cans of worms everywhere? I tried that as a business. It doesn't work. So if you want to keep it basic, give players the option of adding that to their queue, and if everyone matches up with that, there you go. I would love to hear any ideas you have in the comments for what they could do with draft and whether or not you've enjoyed the implementation of draft inside Pokemon Unite. Thank you all for watching. Thank you for listening. I love you, and I'll see you all next time. Buff Uber Pool Pool.